The games and movie industries are undeniably connected and new points of convergence seem to emerge daily. One of these spaces of conjunction is video and live streaming. The movie industry has a lot of experience reaching and monetizing their audience and utilizing platforms to bring their content to the viewers. Streaming, for example, subscriptions are the new normal in this area and gather countless viewers. The games industry, on the other hand, has mastered community building and understands engaging fans for their products, using live streamers as ambassadors to spread the word about their games. We want to dive into the connection points and opportunities for mutual benefit between these industries and how content itself is created with streaming in mind. Welcome to the MediaNet Games panel Streaming between community building and viewer retention. I'm very happy to have two special guests and we want to have a look at them as well. Welcome Johanna Pirker and Christopher Hamilton. Dr. Johanna Pirker is assistant professor, software engineer and researcher at the Institute of Interactive Systems and Data Science at Graz University of Technology. She has a background in software engineering, economics and computer science and finished her master's thesis during a research visit at the famous MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, working on collaborative virtual world environments. In 2017, 4 years ago, she finished her doctoral dissertation in computer science on motivational environments, and she was nominated Forbes 30 Under 30. Christopher Hamilton, on the other side, is Director of Developer Relations at GenVid Technologies, a company dedicated to massive interactive live events, MILES, that offers participants the choice between relaxed lean-back experiences and, on the other hand, more engaging lean-in formats. We will hear about that later in more detail. Prior to working in games, his career spanned print and radio journalism, so he knows different kinds of media, what is, of course, good because in our audience are also people from different kinds of medias. In 2007, so 14 years ago, he started his games career and has since worked for several companies, including, for example, Rovio, the famous creators of Angry Birds. He's passionate about Finland's exceptional game developer community, as I read in one quote. I want to ask you first, Christopher, what's so special about Finland's game developer community?
It's just a very unique setup. I mean, most game developer communities sort of focused around one or two AAA studios, and Helsinki has those, and Remedy and Housemarque. But most of the game industry is really standing on the shoulders of Nokia here. There were a number of small studios that were making small Java type games for Nokia phones. The development cycles were very short, only about, say, 6 months long. So there was a lot of opportunities for learning, a lot of reasons for companies to meet up. Most big AAA studios sign NDAs with bigger studios like Sony or Nintendo or something like this. And because they were selling these games to cellular providers, they didn't have to sign any NDAs. And so they were free to sort of share information and really collaborate with one another, and competing companies work together because essentially Finland is a very small market. Everybody here wanted to be successful on the global market, and they had a very much Finland versus the rest of the world attitude that really created this amazing sense of camaraderie here that really just makes for a very creative and special place where really all people from all companies in the community help each other out and tackle problems.
Perfect. When we think about streaming, probably different people have something different in mind. So to start with, we should probably talk about what streaming means for us. Like the technical definition would be something like, through streaming, an end user can use their media player to start playing digital video, audio, games content before the entire file has been transmitted. But that's, of course, too technical for us. So I thought about what I think are the main important things that we connect with streaming. And I think that there are two phenomena that I would concentrate on today. The first one is on-demand streaming, so something like, for example, Netflix or other platforms where I can stream something that I can pause, I can fast forward, I can rewind, so something that is not live. And on the other hand, live streaming, that means online streaming media where simultaneously something is recorded and broadcasted in real time. Do you agree with this definition and these two phenomena, or do you have other views of how you define streaming? Johanna.
No, I think this works really well. I mean, these days it's quite yes, the word streaming is in all our ears, and I think we need to really define. Okay, streaming basically is this idea that I'm getting data, obviously visual data in that content through the internet, and I mean I think we can really focus, especially in this discussion, on the live streaming component on the one hand, which are like popular platforms like Twitch. However, YouTube Live is also coming here very, very heavily. And on the other hand, on-demand streaming, I mean, this is something which we know for many, many years, right? So with YouTube and of course with Netflix and so on and so forth. So this idea that I can stream all this data, visual data over the web whenever I want to access it. So this is something which is a little bit, I don't know, I would say more known in the general public, but I think as we should take a closer look at live streaming because I think there's so much potential in there, and we can see like heavy trends towards that.
Yes. I would even go a bit further and say, because of course you can advertise a traditional product, let's say a James Bond movie, nowadays through streamers and so on. But I think what is more interesting, and that's what I would like to focus our discussion on, is how streaming, may it be on-demand streaming or live streaming, actually change the content production, like the content itself, and also the user experience. And I've several topics that I want to talk with you about where I think that streaming really changed something, and not just in the way how we advertise things, but also in the way how these products look like in the end. The first thing that I think is interesting is data. Because when I was a kid and I wanted to play a game, I went to a store and I bought a game, installed it at home, and no one ever, apart from my parents, knew how long did I play and how often did I play. And this completely changed through the last years, especially also when we talk about on-demand streaming. I had a chance to talk to CEO Reed Hastings, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, a few years ago, and he explained me their model of these global communities. So Netflix uses really communities where all of us are in these different communities, and they try to deliver content to these communities. They even showed me that some of my communities living in South America, some of them are living in Australia. I don't know them, but we seem to have the same taste. And when Netflix develops something new, they always check at least, is this product does it reach an audience? So it's different than how movies or TV shows were produced like 20 or 30 years ago. They don't reverse engineer it, so that's what I also asked them, because you could also say, we see from the data that we need a movie starring a dog as the main character, but they told me that most creatives wouldn't like that, and they need the best directors for their platform. So their idea is basically, if you pitch something there, may it be a movie or a TV series, they can check with their data, is there an audience that prefers to have this kind of actor or this topic or this tone? So they really have a close look at data when they create new content. Is it similar in the games industry? Are there similar trends like how the on-demand platforms do that? Maybe Christopher.
I don't necessarily want to talk about the on-demand platforms, but certainly when you're researching the marketability of a video game, you're looking at various trends that are happening in the industry, various art styles that might resonate with a particular audience, the theme of the game itself. And there are lots of different points that you can sort of select and sort of gauge the size of the potential audience for that video game. So it seems very intuitive to me that the movie industry has been moving in this direction. At the same time, I also believe that there are, just like there are cycles in style and music, things sort of go through cycles over time. And there's often remakes of movies and nostalgia that sort of recapture an audience that is sort of an older audience that a particular movie might be going after.
Johanna, what do you think? Are games reverse engineered nowadays sometimes?
Yes and no. I mean, it's the same like in pretty much everywhere else. So, of course, there are a lot of companies who really focus on trying to get as much data as possible. And I mean, this is involved in, I have one game idea. I'll make 10 different layouts to this game idea. The data will turn out that one of those will be the successful one. Looking really a lot at the marketing research, but I don't think this is like the right question to ask. I mean, yes, and the games industry works very, very similar. But and this is something which was also like noticed by the Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, because he actually mentioned at some point he was a little bit like upset almost that they had not enough failures, that they had such a high hit rate. Because what does this mean? If you have just one hit after another and so on and so forth, and everything was data driven, this also means that there is no eventually risks, there is no innovation behind that. And this is what I think we really need also. So of course, like data-driven content creation brings us closer to, we know what you like, so we produce you more what you like. But we have no idea what you might like, what is not there yet. So innovation is something which we cannot really drive here. So I think it's super important that we need to also think more about, hey, there is a good value in actually making risks, driving innovation, and then eventually it's a failure. But if not, it might be like a super great success, something entirely new, and bring the world something which they didn't even know that they might need. Hope this makes sense.
Yeah, I totally understand. That was also, just to point it out a bit more directly, Christopher, do you think that data-driven content development kills creativity?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that it does, because there's always a desire to mitigate risk, and so you want to like follow this because you think this is going to challenge, this, it's like more of a sure thing. I have a good friend of mine here in Helsinki, Robin, who talks about the album cover of Nirvana, this very famous Bill getting dragged through the pool with this baby. And his comment is like, if they A/B tested that, it would probably never have been the cover of this album, and yet it's one of the most iconic album covers of all time. In video games, like all art, I think you have to take risks, and you have to there's like a special sauce or a special craziness that comes out with the team. And we iterate on failures. We make tons of failures in video games, and that's okay. But eventually somebody kind of finds the secret sauce and finds something very special that really resonates with people. And, I think the challenging thing here is recreating that. Rovio had Angry Birds, and they really got lucky, and it was sort of right place, right time, right platform, and a magical moment was had. And then, they've spent all of this time trying to recreate that magic and respin that magic into other things.
Yeah, I also remember when I was at Rovio once, they showed us a chart that it was like, I don't know, the 15th try Angry Birds, and the 14 other games that they did before were not such big hits. You probably know it better, Christopher, because you worked there. But yeah, quite often success stories begin with several failures. So I can understand your points here. The second topic that I want to talk about today, and something where I think that streaming really changed something, is interactivity. In former times, when we watched the TV show in television, there was a clear start, a clear end, and you didn't have any interaction. Maybe you could call in. This was most interaction that was possible. Nowadays, that's very different. We also see this convergence between film and games. Bandersnatch was very famous, that Netflix game movie where you could make decisions as a viewer or as an experiencer. And your company, Christopher, is focusing on interaction and interactivity. Maybe we can start with you and maybe tell us a little bit about what you guys do and how interactivity changes the way content is presented nowadays.
Sure thing. I guess what I typically do, because we're sort of a company that is seen as moving in with a lot of trends and things that are happening in the industry. So I want to kind of start by explaining what we are, by explaining what we're not. And so first and foremost, we are not a streamer tool. We feel that streamers only have the ability to show you the player perspective. And as a result, you can't see tactics and strategy. And that if people don't actually play the game themselves, it's very difficult to understand what the streamer is showing them. And often it's not very compelling. And most of the audience is there specifically for the streamer. We're not cloud gaming, we are native cloud streaming, and this scales and is a technology that actually works today. And we're not a platform. We work very closely with live streaming platforms like YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and Huya and others. But we're very much focused on helping developers create viewer-centric experiences. And so we're helping developers make Miles, these massive interactive live events. And this is a new form of entertainment that, as you mentioned in the intro, that brings the best aspects of lean back TV and lean forward video, lean in video gaming, live entertainment kind of all together, where the audience here matters and each individual can decide their own level of involvement, how much they want to lean back and just watch it or how much they want to actually engage with it, but also their level of influence. These viewer-centric experiences are highly accessible. They don't require skill or some big, powerful computer. When we ran Rival last spring, we did really well on low-end Android devices and captured huge audiences in countries like Brazil, Mexico, and India. So it's super accessible. But imagine, if you will, like you're sort of like in an online quiz show where the audience suddenly becomes contestants, or there's a live TV drama where you can influence the storyline. And that's sort of what Rival Peak was. It was sort of set up as this interactive reality TV show that starred a dozen AI characters that could be directed by the audience that was just watching them, but they would engage them in various different ways and help them complete different actions. And they were given a number of topics to vote on, like what the weather might be the next day, or if one character should maybe backstab another character and there would be drama from that, or if there should be some sort of love story. And all of these interactions ended up sort of shaping the whole dialogue or how the story unfolded. So it was really sort of like community-driven narration, if you will. And I'll add that since this was set up as like a Survivor-like competition, the characters that had the least amount of interactions each week were sort of eliminated week by week.
And on which platform does your tool work?
So we're platform agnostic. We feel it's very important that the game developer themselves figure out what audience is best for them. So some experiences might be best lived on Twitch. This Rival Peak was actually a Facebook Watch original. So we had a very close arrangement with Facebook. It was all sort of set up like individual live games, if you will, kind of all strung together. And there was also an additional, speaking of sort of live versus on demand, there was a weekly wrap-up show that starred Will Wheaton, where he would actually interview some of the AI characters and give the audience more of a background of what was happening. And that was all on demand. I mean, it was available once a week to watch live, but then it was available for everybody to watch whenever in their time zone. And then a lot of this is sort of it's a persistent online live stream that is happening. There are no stopping and starting. There's no do-overs. Everybody is just interacting and kind of making the whole story flow forward. But there are elements of this that are actually more on demand. And for example, when people would join the game, there would be dialogues that would sort of help explain what was going on. And that was all sort of done asynchronously. And so really with our events, you had to sort of figure out the optimal balance between what is live and running all the time versus what viewers can take in asynchronously and view on demand.
Do you have other examples? So I think we understood now this reality show, AI reality show, basically. Are there other kind of possible, you mentioned quiz shows, just to give our audience an idea of in which different ways tools like that could be used? Do you have other examples how this interaction could look like?
We have a number of projects that are kind of in development now on the entertainment company side of things. And we're working on one with a horror genre now that's also very it's more puzzly. There's more interactions that the viewers can be involved in. But again, it's everybody getting involved, leaning forward, and sort of creating the storyline as it goes forward.
And if I understand it right, it's always, you don't have to do that as experiencer, user. It's just an option. So if I just want to lean back and watch it, then that's always an option. And if I want to have a more interactive experience, then that's up to me, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So actually, if I understand it right, at the beginning, we played games on our own. Then there started a time where we watched others playing games, Twitch, etc. And now we are in a time where we actually don't just watch these guys, but we interact all together within one game. Johanna, is this a right summary, or what are your thoughts on interactive games and yeah, like also convergence between games and films?
Yeah, I think it will be a really exciting time. Yeah, I mean, you can see like if you look back, how everything became more immersive and more interactive over time. We started off with books, went to movies. Then at some point, I mean, I can remember when I was a child, there was a TV show where you could actually call and be part of a little bit of a, I don't know, game they played, and then you had to select specific answers for the different choices. But you actually always wanted to be a little bit more part of the actual experience. And now, yeah, we have computer games, which is like super interactive, but also streams. I mean streams. Many people never understood like why people watch other play video games. On like just this example of Twitch. So this platform grew mainly because people wanted to watch other play video games, but that's actually not like the lone thing. So it's quite interesting. It's way closer to actually comparing it with the experience you have while watching your favorite soccer match, or then watching a movie, for instance. You have a very different idea when you go to a Twitch chat, because I mean, like just imagine going to a football stadium, and why do you go there? You could also watch the same match at home, right? But you go there because you, I don't know, you like the atmosphere, being surrounded by people who are cheering, who are interested in the game. Maybe you want to support one specific player. Maybe you want to support the whole team. Maybe you just want to be there. You're not interested in the game at all, and you want to sit drink your beer and eat popcorn or whatever. So every one of us has a different idea why we go to a stadium, and the same is true with Twitch. So if you look closer, like who are the spectators, the viewers who are sitting there, it's very different. And like one major thing is certainly the community. That you go into a Twitch chat, you already know certain people. You might know the streamer. For other streamers, however, like if you go to a professional Viever streamer, you might not go there in order to meet the community, but rather to just enjoy like how this person is getting better, and maybe you can also get some skills out of that. So when we design for streams and those interactive experience, we always need to consider what also was Christopher just saying, that there are different types of viewers and spectators, and we have to design for all of them. And there are some who really want to be part of the experience themselves, who want to help maybe the player, or just think of a like fun competitive game. Eventually they want to send them extra boosts that they are faster in a racing game, or like, I don't know, send like some extra enemies to make that game a little more difficult. So it's quite interesting what you can actually do. And now here's the fun thing. So streaming and like this sort of interactive media becomes more and more popular, whereas like sports sorts of gets less viewers over time. And the interesting thing is that now the sports events are actually trying to learn what is going on in those interactive worlds. And just like there's this Formula formula, I think it's called.
Yeah, Formula E.
Formula E, thank you. Where you, as a spectator, where like as someone sitting in the stadium, you can actually vote to give one of your drivers an extra boost. So it's quite interesting. So the strategies we we already see sort of like from the games industry, and this happened so many times in the past, like strategies and innovations coming from the games industry, making its way towards other industries. And I'm pretty sure there are really interesting strategies how we can combine of what we can learn now from esports and from streaming, which might also influence the way how we consume sports or other sorts of medium, of course, like also the traditional film in the future.
So following your argumentation, we have a general trend towards more interactivity. Like things that weren't that interactive, for example, these sports events that you talked about, get more interaction because people are used to have more interaction when consuming some kind of media or event. Because I think that we can also see that, for example, reading books is not that common like it was 50 years ago. People were just sitting there and reading for 3 hours. Nowadays, most of our media consumption is somehow divided into smaller parts, or at least somehow interactive. Even watching a movie, for many people nowadays, is no longer watching a movie, but watching a movie while twittering about it, or while, I don't know, Googling the plot again, or the actors, or whatever. So do you think that there is a general trend, more interactivity, people need more interactivity than 30 years ago? Johanna, you as a researcher.
I mean, our generations change, of course. I mean, for instance, I do still know a world sort of with low internet capacities. But for instance, I grew up in a world where the video game was always with me. And I mean, I see that this certainly had an impact on me. And now just imagine like the new generations grew up where a world without smartphone does not exist. Like every second, if they're waiting for a bus for 3 minutes, they always can grab very quickly their smartphones, which immediately attracts their attention for 3 minutes. So the way they're like they are training their brain is not like that you just wait there for a bus or maybe start reading a book, but you can have distractions for a couple of minutes, and this certainly does also change a little bit our like general habits. And no wonder that many mediums are trying to get more motivating, more immersive, more interactive, because this actually attracts, of course, the attention span. I mean, we also know that the new generations have eventually lower attention spans, but the interactivity certainly helps to keep them, or to keep everyone engaged in the medium and attracted. And again, since like just imagine like I live in this world where so many distractions all around me. There's TikTok, there's Instagram or Facebook, if this still anyone knows it there. But the idea is like, how can we now create experiences which are like super immersive, and then bringing everyone back to this one experience together. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, totally. We talked about data, we talked about interactivity. I think there is a third thing that really changed since we have streaming, on-demand streaming and video streaming, and that's community. And I think community is something that games are particularly good at because looking at TV shows, looking at movies, there is normally no community manager. Maybe just for the AAA films or AAA TV shows, but it's not that common that there is someone who is just responsible communicating with the fans, communicating with the community. What can other media sectors learn from games regarding community? Christopher.
I would argue maybe against that, because when I think of live sports, I think of communities and people that are rallying around a certain thing, and I think that live sports are actually one of the few things that get the biggest ratings right now, because you kind of need to see it live. Obviously, you know, I guess there used to be fan clubs and this sort of thing for non-gaming things, but I think that really just building communities and having that outreach for whatever medium you're working with is important. I think it helps people, you know, understand some of the nuances that they might not otherwise get.
Yeah, then let me put it another way. Because actually what is most interesting for me is always how does this influence the creation or the consumption of a media product. And I think if you develop a game, you always have your community already in mind and you sometimes co-develop something with your community. So I think it's more, for game developers, they really think about their community. And that's, maybe you're right with sport clubs, sport events, that's something different. But at least when we talk about media products like films or TV shows or something like that, quite often people don't have such a close connection to their community. So don't you think that game developers have a special role, a role model somehow for other media producers in terms of how connected you are with the people who in the end are your users?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it, and it really depends on the style of game that you're making. If you're making more of an indie game that is a premium model, it's really reaching out to your fan base and possibly fans of other games that are similar to your game and getting the collaboration and working with them and making it sort of a joint effort with everything. If it is a free-to-play game or a live service game, it is all about community. It is all about your customers. It is all about making them feel connected to what you're doing. And it's all about getting their feedback to make your game better and more kind of the product that they want it to be. And just having that sort of two-way dialogue is something that video game developers can do because it's something that it's sort of constantly in development, that it's difficult. You don't have that sort of two-way communication between filmmakers or TV producers.
Johanna, you are also a streamer. So talking about live streaming, do you think that nowadays as a game developer, I already have in mind that people will probably watch other players playing the game and having in mind that my content should be watchable in somehow?
No, certainly that's a big thing, and that's exactly why other companies like Genvid are like super important. That you need to make your game not only, I mean, not all games, but for most of the games, I would really say that if you develop a game, it should not only be playable but also streamable, so that others when they join. That they can either be even part. This would be like the best case of the game experience, but certainly to understand what is going on. That there's like extra information which is visible also, like which makes it easier for viewers to understand what is the current state of the game and so on and so forth. So I think there's like a lot of things which do change because our game shouldn't only like playable but also streamable. This makes it quite interesting, but also complex, because game development itself is a very complex process as it is. But here comes this additional dimension to it. But I think this also gives us a lot of chances because, I mean, speaking of communities, I think it's always a really lovely idea to actually make something which is already, while it's being developed, there is a growing community around that, eventually trying to push it forward, trying to help the developers. We can see this a lot in indie dev projects where even like for instance at Kickstarter projects, where then the communities are even like somewhat involved in the game development, like a small characters, or at least in the credits or something like that. So something like this is certainly changing how games are being developed.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, because I also thought about this marketing part of how does marketing already influence the way content is created. So if we think of games, sometimes they already have like voiceovers of famous influencers, or they somehow integrate these personalities in forms of avatars or other things. Do you think that this is a trend that will even get bigger and bigger throughout the next years? Or how do you think, how close will be the connection between game developers and influencers, streamers, in terms of marketing? Johanna.
I mean, it's already very, 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 very here. So a lot of companies are actually like working closely together with influencers. Influencers marketing is one of the biggest things these days, because I mean, we can see it as like small games like Among Us. This game has been out there for years, if I'm correct. And then there was, I think it was a YouTuber who saw potential in the game, was streaming or making a video about the game, and all of a sudden, like everyone got super excited just because it was on. They saw videos about that game, and then it became famous and hyped and everything. So you can see what one single person, one influencer can actually do with one game, which was already good, which was already out there a long time, but just was not seen yet. Because the game market is right now, like every market, very saturated. It's very competitive. Every day, like so many games are being published on Steam. And super good ones. So how to become visible. And of course, like traditional marketing is not enough anymore. So it's all more about alternative forms of marketing, again, working together with influencers, for instance.
Yeah, Christopher, do you think, well, I thought already one next step, so not just using influencers as marketing tools, but is it a trend that these influencers really get into our games or films or whatever, like that they're really part of it? Because we already, as a developer or as a content creator, I have to integrate certain influencers or streamers, because marketing-wise, it would be helpful if a main character has the shape of a certain influencer. Do you think that this will be something that gets bigger the next years? And how do you see that? Is it helpful, or is it also somehow like destroying the art if you already think of these marketing aspects while creating a creative product?
It's challenging to say if it's really destroying it or not. I think it is sort of where we're at right now with the industry. It is just so saturated. There's so much consolidation within the industry. In order to make your game stand out, you kind of need to have some sort of special IP or some sort of guest appearance with people in it, something to create a lot of buzz, something that gets and attracts people to the game. It's all about finding a way to lower the costs of getting users into your game, because we're at this point where we need to buy users to get them in and play the game. Certainly when we're looking at free-to-play games. So like this is a trend that's just going to continue growing from my perspective. There's always going to be some sort of crazy breakout game that bucks this trend. But certainly when you look at Rovio and how it was always leveraging Angry Birds, how it was always leveraging some sort of special person or some sort of special tie-in or some sort of global event, it was all about creating that marketing buzz, all about finding ways to pair a game with a completely different audience that was interesting for the company to go after, and pushing it forward in that direction.
Yeah, interesting that you already talked about monetization, because this is the next topic that I had in mind when thinking about what really changed through streaming. And in this case, I explicitly mean on-demand streaming, especially the subscription models that we know from platforms like, for example, Netflix. I got in contact with that because I developed a show for Audible, so this audio streaming platform from Amazon. And when I went there the first time, I asked them, what do you think, how many listeners do you want to have to be satisfied? And also my friends, when it got out, asked me, how many listeners did you have already? And I just learned, working for a platform that uses a subscription model, that it's very different to, let's say, for example, linear TV stations, because traditional linear TV channels always needed something that is one-size-fits-all content, because there is one slot, Monday, 8 o'clock, and we need as many people as possible watching this show, because then we can have better, then we can have advertisement and we can sell it more expensively if many people are watching. And I just learned that all these platforms have a very different mindset, because they don't need, like they say, they don't need something for everyone. But TV needed one product that is good for everyone. They just need for everyone something. So that means they have these way more interest in niche products, because maybe this niche product attracts someone who then just subscribes this platform, and that helps them way more than having this one product that everybody loves. So it's a very different mindset, and I think We just talked about how somehow trends are, well, let's say, challenging creativity, for example, data-driven development of content. But I think in this case, these new developments really help us creatives, because now we can pitch crazy ideas, and quite often I get the feedback, it's not crazy enough, because we need something that is even more different than the content that we have in linear TV. So is this a chance to have the subscription model? Is it maybe something that games could also learn, in this case, from the media platforms, television, film platforms, where it's more common, as far as I know, than in the games industry? Christopher?
You see this in the games industry, you see this in film. I personally love this, that I can watch some very obscure, 1970s Hungarian horror movie on some streaming platform that would never appear on broadcast TV. So I welcome all of this. But at the same time, you can have a free-to-play game that reaches a very niche audience, that has a small DAO, but monetizes that audience very well. And the graphs and the curves of this won't look kind of what a normal graph would look at, but it would still be financially successful and totally function. It's just the math and the numbers, and as you look at them and as you crunch them towards profitability, the graph just looks a little different.
Yeah, Johanna, what are your thoughts on the subscription model?
No, I think it's quite interesting that like platforms like Twitch, for instance, give us a very, very broad range. Like also Christopher was just mentioning, there are so many niche products. For instance, I'm following a channel which is actually a German farmer who takes you every day onto a little bit of like what he's doing actually every day on his farm, and for me it's quite interesting. This is something which would never find its place in a traditional TV setup, because everything is given, everything is like curated, but through that it's much nicer that every one of us can actually watch what they want to do. And I'm pretty sure this is also more coming towards traditional sports formats. So for instance, that there will be somewhere in the future sport events, and now it's like, I think like a couple of TV broadcasters have the rights to show this sports match, but I'm pretty sure like also in the future this might change, and then it's like a lot of different moderators which have maybe a different kind of humor. We can already see this now in different live events. For instance, if there's like a new event happening at NASA, there will be broadcasters who are moderating the takeoff, and you can actually decide, do you want to watch the original NASA channel, do you want to watch the different moderators, and it's a little bit up to your taste, and I think this will become extremely interesting. And certainly will also influence, like it's already influencing how we consume media. If I look at the Twitch statistics now, I think at the moment it's 3 million people watching on Twitch right now, up to like almost 80,000 channels. So if you do the math, it's like about like 40 people. It's not like that. Most of the channels have 0 or 1 viewer, but if you just do the math, and in average it would be 40 viewers per channel. The reality is like a few channels have a lot of viewers, many channels have not a lot of viewers, but just looking at this variety, and this sort of reflects how the internet formed over time anyway. So because back then, like just looking at the internet was something which was created and you were the reader. The traditional internet, you were just like a reader and consumer. Someone added content and you consumed it. Then with Web 2.0, everything became way more, all of us became actually more of contributors and not only consumers. We were able to add our own more homepages, create YouTube videos, create Wikipedia pages, and this sort of escalated. And now we are in a time with Twitch that every one of us is not only like a YouTube star and a Wikipedia editor, but we are also all moderators in our own small little talk shows, or like making our own TV program all day long, and that's quite interesting. And this will certainly change us. Yeah, I know the question escalated, but I find this quite interesting.
No, it's very interesting, because I just thought about then in a few years, maybe not the whole country makes fun of the one commentator of the football World Cup Championship finals, and Bela Reti has a quieter life because not everyone makes fun of him, and everyone watches just the one that he or she prefers to be her or his host for events like that. So an interesting thought, definitely. And leads us to our final round, because I would like to have your estimations of the future and to get an outlook how these trends will develop. We saw over the last years movements on an industry level with acquisitions and mergers of franchises into multi-platform IPs. Twitch acquired by Amazon, Netflix started its own game studio. Do you think, will there be some form of more and more mergers, big companies getting together, and in the end we just have multinational media companies that do games, films, media at the same time? Or what do you think, how will this market develop? This time, Johanna is the first to answer.
Sure. I mean, the most recent news, is certainly also what is going on at Facebook, or now Meta, around the metaverse. I come from a virtuality background, so we like most of our research is towards virtuality, and this is something which I'm certainly very excited about. And I personally see a huge potential there, and I think, especially if we look into the entertainment market, if we look into the games market, and the movie industry, I think virtuality will be an interesting addition. So I already want to underline, I don't think this will be taking away our traditional movie or TV experiences. I don't think it will take away our traditional game experiences. There will be certainly a place for that. It will be an interesting addition. And I can fully see that this also helps to bridge the two industries. I can really see that this might help to bring the games industry and the movie industry, which are actually becoming closer, I feel, every year. But this will be something which might be super interesting to actually create entirely new sort of experiences, which we might not even be aware of, that we might want to have them and need them. And I think this will be cool times ahead. In that regard. What is also interesting, if you look into virtuality, we actually, when we design virtuality experiences, even though like the movie industry is super interested in the VR technology, not only like, it's also interesting to make films with VR. That's a different story. I'm not going there. But VR is also super, like, of course, super interesting to watch, like those 360-degree movies, for instance. But here's the interesting thing. This creating such an experience is actually, on the one hand, very close to games, but it's also very close to theater, closer to theater than actually creating a traditional movie. Why? Because on a theater, which was always like a problem, like already like hundreds of years ago, if you make a theater production, you have this giant stage. And there's like, let's just imagine there's 20 people up there, but just one actor is actually like the main role. And there's like what's happening there. And you want all the audience watch this one person, listen to this one person, and be concentrated on the one person. But the rest of the stage, they cannot just like disappear all of a sudden. They cannot just like freeze and pretend nothing happened. So they should do something, but it shouldn't be too spectacular to not take away the audience attraction, right? And the same is happening for virtuality. But because in theory, if I have a VR experience and the movie is like just in front of me, I can just turn away and look all the time to what is happening on the other side of my VR experience. Oh, there's a nice garden and so on and so forth. This actually happened to me when I watched my first horror movie in 360. I thought, oh, this is like the most boring experience I ever had. There's a nice window. Okay, it's a little bit dark outside. And then after like a couple of minutes, I actually turned around and it was like already 5 creatures trying to eat me or something like that. But this is like something which is quite interesting because again, this is something which we know from the game design, how to drive the player to specific events or to specific points to the map, or from theater, how to attract the viewer to a specific point. And so not so much in the movie, because in the movie it's always like, okay, if I want to have the focus on this character, I'll just add a super zoom with the camera on that character.
And as you are an expert of virtual reality, what do you think will be the killer application for VR? Because I'm also a fan, I also have virtual reality glasses at home, and I enjoy using it, but quite often I think about what will be the one thing, like for example for smartphones, I guess it was something like WhatsApp. When even my mother decided, now I need a smartphone because I want to ride with my friends. What will be like the one thing that attracts really not just the fans and the, let's say, early adopters, but more like the mainstream people to start using virtual reality?
I mean, there are so many good studies already out there, how it's used in all different fields. Like for instance, it's used in astronauts training already. It's used at Walmart to train employees. So I think like also in everyday use, we will encounter VR at some point. Also for therapy, for instance, beautiful studies showing how VR can be used to reduce post-traumatic stress disorders and syndrome. And I think that like through having it more accessible and showing actually the potential. I think this will be a really, really big starting point, like it was with smartphones. I mean, also like this constant knowledge that you can Google things, then maybe also like health tips and so on and so forth. So it was, I think, like a lot of things, and not like only WhatsApp being like this one. Fantastic encounter someone had, and I can see like a lot of potential also in social applications, because what we can see in games, from the games industry, that many people are coming towards games because they want to have social experiences. And I honestly believe like with virtual reality, if we would have had virtual reality within those weird, terrible lockdown times, and would be able to escape, for instance, the small, at some point, every apartment, whatever small it is, it will become small, and escape that and go to Mount Everest, or go there with friends and actually spend time with them. Because this is the thing which it's like here in this call we're having, like it's super nice to see the both of you, but it's very obvious that all 3 of us are in different locations. I'm in my office, Christopher's in the office, you're in the studio. So we are really physically apart. But in games, in social games, we spend time together. In Animal Crossing, we can visit a virtual museum together. In virtual reality, it's even more immersive. We can actually be next to each other. And I think this will be something which will change a lot of things.
Christopher, what are your ideas of or main trends that you see for the future of streaming, on-demand streaming, video streaming, the topics that we talked about today?
Sure. I want to quickly go back to what Johanna was saying about VR and say I do agree that there are lots of applications that are amazing. A lot of the ones in the health and medical field are the ones that are most interesting to me. I think the biggest problem is the fact that everything is so, there's so many different devices. It's very difficult to choose one particular one to develop for. And that is a huge sort of challenge for the industry, but I think we'll overcome that. It's just hard to get mass adoption for that, really. The other thing I wanted to go back to, which was another point that was brought up earlier, is how you can have the same event, but you can have different experiences with it. And that is with the Super Bowl, this big sort of American football event that happens once a year. They had one, you can watch it in multiple different languages. But they also had like a special version more geared towards kids that would have, sort of slime that would fall out of the sky and all sorts of crazy sort of AR extended things for when players scored a touchdown or something like this. And it was really a way for to create a whole new experience from event that is sort of like more targeted towards a completely different audience that I find very interesting. Johanna called out the metaverse, and our company has sort of been called out as using a technology that will bridge us to the metaverse because our cloud streaming tech already works today. It's accessible. It can be reach millions of people without requiring prohibitively expensive cloud processing. Recently, the DFC Intelligence released a report that basically said major media companies like Facebook and Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, did they leave anybody out there? I think I got them all. That they look at these interactive cloud contents as expansions to their existing social networks or entertainment and streaming services. And the analyst firm said that these new concepts like the metaverse and like Miles expand the definition of gaming and interactive content. And this is really expected to drive the future of interactive cloud streaming. These emerging events are already generating significant revenue opportunities for companies, particularly from virtual item sales. So you can have microtransactions in sort of movie experiences now. Mm-hmm. So cloud gaming, interactive streaming tie closely together with the concept of the metaverse and expand products and services beyond the traditional video game market. And just new types of products expand the definition of games and interactivity. And this is sort of the key sort of trend in growth that I think we're going to see. Mm-hmm.
Dan, thanks a lot already for your thoughts. Now we will have a look at the audience and their questions, interactivity. I will just read them and you can decide who would like to answer. The first one is, imagine the game studio of the future and the games they develop. Are we approaching Ready Player One, and when will we be there? Thoughts on that?
We're already moving in that direction. And I just look at the number of companies that are talking about NFTs and, play to earn, all of these different technologies as a way to create their own little spaces of the internet that there'll be platforms and games being made for these things, and they will be interchangeable, and there will be items that go back and forth. It's happening now. Companies are here in Helsinki at Slush discussing it. Mm-hmm.
Then we have another question. What will platforms of the future look like? Will there be a difference with what Steam offers versus what Netflix offers, or even Facebook? So a bit like this convergence that we talked about. Will they, in the end, will they all offer the same kind of media, just different content?
I don't know. It's a difficult question because we can see it now. There's not Netflix anymore. There's Disney Plus, and there's so many of those services. And I think we so slowly see similar things happening in games. Every console has their own market right now, and so it's sort of like, hey, if you want to get all the content, for instance, I'm just making the example of streaming media right now. I need Amazon, I need Disney Plus, I need Netflix, I need BBC. I need Sky. I could spend like hundreds, thousands of dollars every month if I really want to have it all. Mm-hmm. And I think at some point, more and more game platforms are also going towards a subscription model. And I think at some point there will be a point where we need to summarize again. So we're spreading right now, mm-hmm. Like crazy, and I do believe at some point there will be something that we need to summarize again, mm-hmm. and have more inclusive ways, hopefully.
We have one last question. Okay, Christopher.
No, I was just going to say Apple Arcade, Game Pass, they're all these things that you need, and you can't afford to have them all. You don't have the time to use them all. I think we're going to see more people hopping from service to service to service as some new interesting content comes out, and that doesn't surprise me.
Your answers were quite interesting because as if you would have known the third question, because that really belongs to what you just said about the different services that you right now need a subscription for all of them, and it might get expensive. So last question is, it seems like piracy as a topic has vanished with subscriptions. Do you believe too many services will give it another rise?
I'm not sure if piracy just vanished. Maybe it's just not as visible as it was, because also like there is so much content out there, so much content out there. That's piracy itself is a very, very difficult topic and would probably like be out of scope for this conversation. Yeah, but I would rather be. I think it, like all the different services will certainly come with other problems of cheating and other problems of internet criminal ideas. So I think there will be more actually to watch out than just privacy. Piracy. Privacy a topic, by the way.
Okay, then thanks a lot, our two guests, for your insights and this interesting hour. We are quite on time, as if it would be linear TV, so we didn't use less or more time than originally planned, 1 hour. And I think we learned a lot about different trends in streaming and video streaming, and especially what it did with the content creators, and also with the audience, how they react, how they consume media nowadays, how they interact with media. Thanks a lot for all the ideas that you gave us. MediaNet likes to say thanks to the sponsors that we don't have to mention because all of you guys can see them up here. And yeah, we hope we will have next panels on subjects that are as interesting as this one. Thanks a lot to everyone. Have a good night, and thanks our two guests, Johanna and Christopher. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Super.
Do we leave now? Do we?